So good morning. I'm very pleased to be here in a subject which is not ours or mine, but I will try in essentially a few minutes with Hugues and Marie-Célie to convince you that Paris and France is actually the best place to be dealing with, right, when you're looking about infrastructure. For that, I'm going to basically use what we do more and more, which is essentially a set of slides, and recognizing upfront that essentially I'm absolutely not a competent person in INFRAWEEK because I came from the digital industry, as you saw, since I've been running Apple for essentially 13 years in Europe. I've been doing venture capital, but I've been living, like many of us, essentially this, which is essentially a real, proper French bashing. That's essentially what we've been enjoying for 2 decades, and I think things are changing. And the reasons why someone like me, coming from the private sectors, has been joining somehow the public governments is because we fundamentally believe that we can do something about it and really build a proper renaissance. So to do so, I had the privilege to be named by the President Macron as ambassador to foreign investment, leading an agency which is called Business France. And I want you to retain this name of Business France because it's essentially a public-private agency which is dealing with both the public-private sectors, really welcoming investors like all of you in the rooms, or as well as helping companies to basically go abroad. We've got essentially 3 functions. We are mirroring the diplomatic networks throughout the world, and we do 3 things. We deal with exports, which is not really the subject today, but that's really helping our young companies to export. We're also dealing with the image of France, and God knows if we had a big work to do, and we need to continue to do on this, but we're also dealing with invest. In this respect, it's very important that you understand that the results are starting to really show up. If you look at last year's attractiveness scorecard, right, which we're publishing every year, I invite you to follow that up, you're going to see that France never been as attractive as lately, right, with 17% growth year on year, with in excess of 13 projects, all built in France. Now, this is very important for us because it allows us to challenge some of the issues that we have, typically the jobs. We've got up to 30,000 jobs, which has been either maintained or actually created through this project. Now, there's something which also happens in France, which is very important. You need to understand that we understand that welcoming foreign monies, foreign capital, foreign brains is becoming very important. If all the international or foreign companies represent 1% only of the overall companies in France, we have actually more than 12%, 11% of the job at stake here. These same companies represent up to 21% of the research and development and up to 30% of the exports. All of that to tell you that you've got now a nation, a government, people which really bring you, if I may say, the red carpet to welcome investment because we know it's good for basically the wealth creations and our citizens here. Now, once I said that, let's go back to the core of the subject and essentially explains why we believe that France, as Thierry has been mentioning early on, has got a very unique stance on infrastructure. First, thanks to a very dramatic event, we all understood that at the top of the headline, the quality of the infrastructure is becoming extremely important. You got even McKinsey, which is telling us that you got an immense gap in between the needed infrastructure, 3.3 trillions, and what effectively, if you take the total sum of all the infrastructure to date, which is 2.8. This gap is essentially 800 billion gaps that they pretend exist. We just tell you a little more about the opportunity at stake for all of you in the room. You got also on the other side of the Atlantic, someone which has been clearly stating that the government cannot continue to procrastinate it. I say it, it's an amazing name, right? Procrastinated, which is essentially they cannot continue not to do something about it. And that has been part of President Trump's core initiatives overall. So that's the first reason. There is a lot to do, the market is huge, and there is a massive gap. The second point is very linked to this concept of the Earth OpenShoot Day, which is the day by which we're consuming more resources than we're producing. Every day, like every year, like a clock, this day is getting closer and closer. Yes, Thierry, there is some good news this morning with the GIEC saying that we can do something about it if we move. But it's very important that we understand that what is at stake is to implement the Paris Accord, so to set the proper tone throughout the international community. And that's really what has been happening back in there. And you know, this is an area where France, once more times, thanks to President Macron's quick move after the US withdrew from him, has been taking essentially a lead in many respects, a lead which has been recognized just a few days back in UN, where he has been nominating essentially the champion of the earth. It's not a title that we want. We would rather prefer not to need that titles. But the hard fact is that France wants and is going to lead the phase there. Now, in order to lead, you need to behave. And to behave, you can take this measure, which is really about looking at how we do compared to other countries. If you basically benchmark our carbon emissions against essentially the GDP, France is actually in the top 3 most virtuous countries. There is a lot more to do, but we believe that we will continue these transitions as this is part of the core of what we're doing. So we went basically to see a gap infrastructure. France wants to take the lead on that battle, which is related to green environment. But also, we're also businessmen now, and we clearly understand that infrastructure are very great for attracting talents. When we ask foreign investors, what are the reasons which are really matters, actually you will find out that the infrastructure, the communications are actually top of the range. And this is why we're putting, and I'm so pleased to be here, and thank you again to the organizer, to let us the floor to basically explain that. And why is this? Because we as a country, for essentially decades, we've been offering and building a lot of investment into this infrastructure. France has got a worldwide class infrastructure in terms of harbor, airports, communications, freeways, and so on, which we want to really put and actually brings to our investors. We've got also, and that was already said, some of the top key players. If you look at the list of the world best infrastructure players, 3 of the top 5 are French. And that's not basically just, it just didn't happen like this. It has been built over in excess of 3 to 4 decades over the post-war. If you look line by line on the core needs or sub-segment required for infrastructure, being communications, telcos, energy, real estate, or transports, on each and any of these sectors, we've got some key players. Better than that, you in the rooms are pouring money into infrastructure, both at home, where we're actually over-investing, as well as Europe. And yes, Thierry, there is a gap in Africa, and that has been totally spotted, and we're now trying to work and raise money and do something about it. Now, better to show you more figures, I want to also show you what is infrastructure about. And I couldn't resist to basically the privilege to show you some of the most beautiful stuff that we've been doing. Look, this is essentially the Viaduc de Milo by Eiffage. This is a 2,460 meters long bridge, which is really a state-of-the-art bridge overall. It's essentially at home. But we got also a company like Vinci, which can go in Portugal and build a 17 kilometers long Vasco da Gama bridge in Lisbon. And if you go even further or far, you will be able to also showcase the French excellence when you go in South Africa at Norfolk Cape with essentially the Catu Solar. So that's a concrete example of what this is about. And for that, we know that's something, and I know something about that from the tech, you need a proper ecosystems. What the Silicon Valley has been doing in IT, we are trying to do it here in France and in Europe. Now, my pitch and my sales, if I may say, is not yet finished, because I want to give you another 5 reasons why we strongly believe that we got a lot of what it takes to basically be successful. So let me first start with essentially the talent. Now, we know, and you may know, or you may recognize, that we've got the right audience, right? France has one of the best talent pool. 1 million of engineers, which is as many as Germany, despite a delta of 20% GDP. Every year, like a clock, we've got in excess of 35 to 40,000 extremely highly well-qualified engineers getting on the market. We've got also the ability not to attract talent. 75,000 PhD, including 41% of them coming from abroad. So this talent pool is unique. And into the infrastructure world, many of you in the rooms coming from this superb school, we've got some of the world-class infrastructure curriculum. It's not just enough to have engineers, but you need also to make sure that you got the right curriculum to prepare and support and fuel the ecosystems that I just shown you. So here's we obviously can talk of École des Ponts et Chaussées or Polytechnique, but there is many behind this. So the first core idea is we've got the right talent. The second idea is that we've got an amazing round of investment or events coming in. I'm not going to talk about the Ryder Cup, having Europe winning it against the US, which is always a pleasure. But look at the world top-class events that we've got, with a peak in 2024, which is the Olympic Games, right? And these Olympic Games in 2004 are going to create some massive opportunities, since we're going to create and upgrade many of infrastructure. Actually, not only from the Olympics, but going forward further in 2024 or 30. So that's very important. But we got another project that is not made known or well presented till now, which is the Saclay Innovation Hub. And that's something which is very close to my heart. You need to realize that in Saclay, we've got a concentration of core institutions, innovation hub, accelerator, incubators, like no one else. I hate the fact that we said this is the Silicon Valley of Europe. I don't think we're going to do ever another Silicon Valley. But you've got here what it takes to basically take full benefit of the Rev.4 and the next phase of the digital revolutions. Now, once I said that we have the talents, that we have the infrastructures, you need also to know that we benefit from an amazing environment, right? You're successful very often because of your own strength, which is what I've been trying to show you, but also because you take benefit of what's happening around you. And what is happening around you, us, is very clear. You got protectionism, nationalism, and you got the Brexit. And yes, the hard fact is that the Brexit is going to create a massive talent relocalizations. And yes, Arnaud is illustrating here for your price, right? Arnaud Bresson. We are somewhere positioning ourselves as the best possible gateway of entry for Europe and the financial capital of the continent. We're not yet willing to basically challenge the city. Actually, we are. But the fact is that we are benefiting of the Brexits, even if this is a very, very sad story. And guess what? The media are trying to basically, are illustrating and recognizing all of this. Now, once we said that, this is going at par with the fact, something that I learned through studying basically your industry, is that Europe's biggest market for office real estate is actually France. And this is a market which is growing by 15%. And this is something very important, because when you are able to offer free space, you're able to attract the talent at a cheaper cost. And that's why Paris is so competitive compared to London, Berlin, or many other places, even right now. So we got the talent, we've got essentially the infrastructure project, we've got the capital to basically do this, and yes, we've got also something else, which is that because of our geographical positioning, we're going to take full benefit of something massive which is happening under our eyes, which is the explosion of e-commerce. 1 out of 6 value dollars trading into a matter of few years is going to be through e-commerce. In order to support that, you need to be able to offer an amazing set of infrastructure. When with our minister, Mrs. Born, we are going to UPS in Ivry, demonstrating that you have a 30,000 square meters with 8 kilometers of conveyors, state-of-the-art logistics centers. When we are basically welcoming 2,000 jobs with Amazon in Amiens, we're demonstrating that France can position itself as the best gateway of entry to serve this 500 million community of market. And that's really actually is already demonstrating the fact. Today, when anyone's outside of Europe think about Europe as a logistics places, 1 out of 5 projects is landing in France. That's the results of our attractivity tables just a few months back. So all of that to tell you that we've got a lot to offer, but I wouldn't say this last. You can do all of that, but if you don't have the policy makers, which are benevolent and supporting this, you only get half of the benefit. And in this area, here again, all the basically statements which were made till now by our speakers are extremely true. Look, you've got today France and public administrations, which is putting in excess of 3% of the GDP on infrastructure. If you focus essentially on the transportation infrastructures, we are even on the lead with 1%. Now, when you look at what our Minister of Transport is stating, you look at the 5-year plan, we move from a mere 9 billion. For the next 5 years, we're going to be at 13 billion euros to be invested in this area. So all of that to tell you that France and the government is trying to leverage to be far more virtuous in order to support this. We've got even a government, and sometimes I've got doubt about that, which is willing to offer the broadband to up to 100% of the oil populations. That means a lot more infrastructure to be deployed. You got a government which essentially wants to leverage also our economy to be greener by putting more investment into the ecological transitions. So I really believe that if at that stage you haven't get the point about France is on the go, moving and investing in infrastructures, I'm still going to repeat it. And to repeat it, I wanted to tell you as a last point that we are undergoing to a massive transformations, right? This is essentially the front covers of the elections of President Macron on the 5th of November, I think, 5th of May 2017. But essentially you need, as a final point, to understand that our political landscape have changed dramatically. You've got 75% of newcomers in the National Assembly, and these guys want to change the country, transform it. You've got a social landscapes through the Ordonnance Pénicaud back in September 17, which have been dramatically impacting essentially the work law and making it far more business friendly. You got tax rate, which has been readjusting overall. And I think all in all, you got also the willingness to invest for tomorrow, right? Which is essentially all the investment that we've been doing and announcing over the last time. Last but not least, even the good old railway has gone through massive transformations. You may have heard about strikes for a long time. Yes, we had 3 or 4 months of kind of mess, but hard facts is that it's happening. It's happening at the speed that it requires because it's a massive transformations. But all of that is actually on the go. Now, you may say, wow, the Frenchies have been doing what it takes in a year to transform the country. But the truth matters, on the 5th of September, the government has been announcing a series of reforms which is showing that the momentum continues. Yes, Thierry, I'm doing a little of sales speech for my government, but I trust in what we're doing. I come from a business background where guys like me have been waiting for 20 years that is finally happening. And we know that this is important. That's why at Business France, we even decided to essentially put some resource to welcome you better, to essentially support and work on some of these projects. And essentially, I just want to tell you that as of it stands today, you've got Pascal Rivière, which is somewhere in the rooms, which at the break you will be able to see, to essentially meet her and make sure that we can put all the people and the resource we got on hand at Business France to help you to join us into these amazing transformations. Now, just a final word. You remember that I show you this amazing bashing, right? I love these slides. Now, the real sex when you are in business and when you're doing the job I'm doing right now is when you have last year the same economists, which is for 2 decades, I've been talking about French bashing, which actually stating that France is back and is the country of the year. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marie-Célie Guillaume and I am CEO of Paris La Défense. Paris La Défense, the business district and the public organization that is in charge of urban planning and managing this business district. So I have a little movie that is supposed to be shown.
Our story starts up here. A view on the world, a vision of the future. Architectural ventures above all others. Extraordinary urban innovation that would change Paris forever. France was showcasing its international ambitions to the world. But to truly accomplish this mission, we had to go to ground level and create connections with the people. Connections between the city and its inhabitants, between life and work, action and distraction, between cultural events and cultural blends. From its origins at great heights, Paris La Défense now develops in all directions and in great depth. It's more than an urban project, it's a people project. Because it's larger than life, it boosts the region and creates a collective energy. Entrepreneurial spirit thrives and know-how mingles. Because it's larger than life, it feeds off diversity and creates an augmented experience. La vie en grand. Paris La Défense.
So as I was saying, I'm a CEO of Paris La Défense, which is a public organization that was created this year, 1st of January, under the authority of local government, which comes after 60 years of managing by the state of this business district. We are a perfect example of what was being talked about by the previous speakers with the alliance of the public authority and private investment in La Défense. The business district of La Défense was created 60 years ago by the Général de Gaulle, who was the president of France at that time. It was a kind of crazy project by the Général de Gaulle, who wanted to show the world in the late 50s that the French economy was recovering from the Second World War, and he decided to create this district outside of Paris, outside of the historical Paris, to symbolize the modernity and the dynamism of French economy. And that's how La Défense was created. And today, we are 60 years ago, so it's a celebration. We are kind of an old lady, 60 years. But at the same time, we are at a new period of the life of this business district with a real new dynamic that has been created in the last months and years. A recent survey by EY and ULI showed that we are the fourth business district, the most attractive in the world, fourth business district, the most attractive, considering a whole different variety of criteria. And the first one in continental Europe. So this is the result. I'm trying to move the slides, but it's not working. Oh, there we are. Okay, thanks. So this is a result of 60 years of active investment by the public authorities, by the French state, and also by private investors. Our main strength here in La Défense is the 3.6 million square meters of office spaces allied to our public spaces. We have in La Défense the largest pedestrian area in Europe. And you know that today all the towns, here in Paris of course, but not only in Paris, are struggling to chase cars out of the cities to give the cities back to pedestrians. In La Défense, we are lucky enough to have this pedestrian area because this was the original choice to build a business district on a slab that on all the public transportations are concentrated underneath. And so on top you have the towers, you have public spaces, you have pieces of arts, and a great quality of public spaces. Our second strength in La Défense is our transportation hub. We are in the midst of a very huge transportation hub, only 10 minutes away by the metro from the historical center of Paris, from the Louvre, basically, but also very close to the airports and very centrally situated in Europe, of course, as Pascal Cagny mentioned earlier. All the public transportations arrive in La Défense. You have the metro, the quick train, the RER, the trains, the tramway. We have a highway arriving in La Défense. So it's a very rich concentration. And in addition to this, the new projects that were mentioned are going to bring 4 new train stations in La Défense. 4, that's huge. 2 for a new line of RER, which is going to be arriving in 4 years, and 2 other stations for the Grand Paris Express, which will increase our transportation hub. In addition, we have a huge parking slot because we say the cars are finished, but they're not finished immediately. And we have, of course, 22,000 parking slots, which is a competitive value for us. The third quality that we have, the third strength we have in La Défense is our ecosystem, with a very rich and diverse ecosystem, with mainly 500 companies that are established in La Défense. 40% of them are international companies. But this ecosystem is growing more varied these years, with more and more small and startups, small companies and startups, which is, of course, a big issue for us, for all the international business districts in the world, is to be able to attract startups and innovation and not be only a reservoir of of big international companies. Finally, we are working on a last aspect that is becoming increasingly important is the quality of urban life and the quality of life. La Défense was thought to be a place dedicated to work, but now more and more it is a place to live, a place to be, a place where you have sports, culture, concert, restaurants, fun, food, all those things are going on. It's a change that has been initiated a few years ago and that is accelerating. As an example, we have the new arena, Paris La Défense Arena, that was delivered last year with a concert of the Rolling Stones. In a few weeks, we're going to have Paul McCartney that's going to have his concert also in La Défense. Those are just examples to show that in La Défense, it's not only a place where you can go and work, it's a place where you can meet, exchange, have fun, and stay in the evening, come on the weekends with a focus on quality of life. Of course, all these aspects are very important today to be able to attract skills, and it's a strong demand of the companies who are establishing in La Défense. It's not only to have very good quality square meters of office, but also all these aspects of life. So talking about investing in Paris La Défense, you have here comparative market trends showing that La Défense is a first-class real estate offer, 189,000 square meters of immediate offers. So we have capacity to integrate new companies, and in the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of companies have been arriving, having as a consequence the vacancy rate dropping from more than 10% to around 5% today. We have a range of flexible solutions being able to host immediately today large companies, but also small companies. And of course, in the post-Brexit competition that we are having with other business districts in Europe, it is an important issue. Last year, as an example, we had 3.27 billion euros invested in La Défense. So it shows the dynamism of the market. With a return on investment of more than 5%. And basically, those investors come from Europe and North America, and our trend today is to attract investors from Asia. I know there's a Japanese delegation and people coming from Asia here, and it's a message I want to give you that we are very willing to attract Asian investors, and we have a lot of marks of interest coming from them. Investing in La Défense today, you have 3 kinds of opportunities. The first category of opportunities is to invest in new projects. We have currently 7 new skyscrapers that are being built. And so this is a first kind of opportunity that I will develop with 3 examples. A second kind of opportunity is to invest in old buildings that have to be renewed because, as I was saying, La Défense was starting to be built 60 years ago. So we have some buildings, more or less 60% of our real estate that has to be totally renewed, and that is a second kind of investment opportunity. And the third category of investment opportunity is the efforts that we're going to be having in the next 10 years to reinvent the business district, and particularly spaces that we have under the slab that were never used until today, and in which we want to invest to bring this cultural, this social life that I was talking about, and that's going to be the big project of the next 10 years. So here I have 3 examples of investments that are possible in La Défense today. This first example is Alto. It's a tower that is under construction today, financed by ADIA, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, a sovereign fund. And La Salle is managing the funds, and it's a speculative development skyscraper. This is the first example. Second example would be the tower Éclat. ECLA has just started to be under construction a few months ago. It's signed by the famous French architect Jean Nouvel. It's also a speculative development, and it is going to be in an area that is of public infrastructure that is being completely transformed. It used to be an area basically for cars with streets and a highway, and this highway is being transformed into a pedestrian promenade with this beautiful skyscraper that is being developed next to a student housing. And a third example of a kind of investment that you can have in La Défense today with this project Jardin de l'Arche, which is located just next to the Arche de la Défense, the Great Arc, the iconic monument of La Défense. It's between the l'Arche de la Défense and Paris La Défense Arena. It's mainly hospitality by Intercontinental Hotel Group, so hotels and offices, and it's perfectly well located, and it's a good example of the new kind of buildings that we are willing to build in La Défense with mixed offices and hotel housing to bring the business district as a whole to become a place to live. So just as Pascal was saying just before, we are in a very dynamic moment right now with the Brexit competition. La Défense, of course, is the business district of France, but it's the first business district in Europe. We are today ready to welcome companies who are willing to leave London and to choose continental Europe and to choose Paris. We have, of course, all the advantages of the greater Paris, being the capacity to attract talents, the education system, the health system, and our real estate offer. Just recently, the European Banking Authority chose to move from London to La Défense, which is, of course, very important. And HSBC, the bank, also is moving to La Défense. So last week, you were mentioning The Economist, but last week the Financial Times cover title was that France was leading the race to attract companies in the post-Brexit area. So what I want to say today is that Paris La Défense is ready to house and to attract all these talents that are going to be relocated from London. And we are investing a lot of public money also to renovate our infrastructures, not only the transportation infrastructures, but all the infrastructures of this business district. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Let me introduce myself. My name is Hugues Parent. I'm CEO of a government-created company 20 years ago, which is Euro-Mediterranean, located in Marseille, south of France. I will go further on that. Of course, we are not as impressive as La Défense. I silly told you how many buildings and other infrastructures will be created there. But for an investor, what is important is the history and the trends that are emerging, first of all, and the returns. So maybe we can compete even with La Défense in some charts and figures. And anyway, I will thank Paris Europlace and Business France to let us explain how you could consider this location. I name my presentation a new investment hotspot. Of course, it's a joke for a new, because Marseille is the oldest city in France, created by the Greeks 26 centuries ago, and it's still there. And where the Greeks arrived 26 centuries ago, it's still what is called the Old Harbor in Marseille. So it's a very old city, but at the center of a very dynamic region. Why is it a new investment hotspot? Well, let us consider only two figures. Within the last 20 years, we injected almost 5 billion euros, 80% from private money, in these renewal of the center of Marseille, created a CBD, created a multifunctional CBD with a lot of retail, housing, and of course, offices. Within the next 10 years, half of this period, we will inject again 5 billion euros, something like 80% coming from the private money. So yes, it's a hotspot, and I try to make you convinced of that. For those who don't know our country, let's go to our sun belt in France, make a little trip this morning. We are located south of France, of course, on the side of the French Riviera, one of the most visited places in Europe. So very attractive through culture, climate, of course. Marseille is at the heart of Europe, of course, but it's also a gateway to Mediterranean countries and Africa. For the future, that might count. Marseille is a very attractive place. Marseille metropolitan area is a very attractive place for tourists, for nature lovers, but it's also a place of industry, and the most trendy industry you can find, like energy with ITER project. ITER is a fusion of atom. It creates energy for tomorrow, 18 billion project. It's a place where Airbus Eurocopter is located. It's a place where you have one of the most important harbor in Europe. It's a place where you have also ST Microelectronics, which is the first manufacturer for chips in Europe. It's a place for Gemalto. So, and it's a place where the research capacity in biotech, healthcare, and electronic is very strong. So we are at the heart of a very, very strong industry area. Some elements on the Greater Marseille area. Within the next 10 years, we will have the need of 55 billion in structural investment between now and 2050. We are right now the second metropolis in France, the first exporting zone in the Mediterranean basin, the first telecom hub in the southern Europe due to the arrival in Marseille. There are 2 or 3 places in the world like this of the underwater data transportation cables. We are the second region in France for foreign investment. We are also the ranking second in France for the scientific research. And of course, first harbor in France and second in the Mediterranean. But where should you consider right now to invest or to bring some investment in this area? Of course, the most dynamic place for investment is the so-called Europe-Mediterranean project. It is, as you see, the whole harbor where the Greeks arrived is on the side of the slide, down. And we are so refurbishing the center of Marseille. We create, within the last 20 years, 1.5 million square meters, creating a CBD from scratch, the only CBD of this metropolitan area, which will take benefit of everything that will happen in this metropolitan area as soon as we solve the institutional difficulties we had in the past to have centralized decision center power. It's now done with the creation of the Métropole Aix-Marseille-Provence institution. So Euro-Mediterranean will take benefit of everything that will be decided for this metropolitan area. Some elements on this area. So as you can see, we created 1.5 million square meters in the last 20 years, as I said before. Among them, something like 650,000 square meters of offices. The rest was retail, offices in a pedestrian in a walking distance from the offices. So it's a very multifunctional CBD we created within the last 20 years. What we will do in the next 10 years will create 2 million, so a bit more than before, square meters, 60% of housing, the rest in offices or retail, which means a lot of need of infrastructures will be a lot of infrastructure will be needed to be on place with this project, like roadways, tunnels, parks, public transportation. That's already decided, but not yet done for the second part of the project. And why should you consider this area now? First of all, because we launched it 1 year ago, the Euromed project part 2, with it composed from these 2 million square meters to build within the next 10 years. We have right now a very attractive cap rate, something like 4.5 on the Euromediterranean district. The values are rising because the demand is growing. We have a global office vacancy that is 6% on the area, but on the new buildings, which is 80% of our buildings for offices, something like 2%, which means that's a reason also why the rental values are growing. And we expect that 50% of the metropolitan future office production will be located within the Euro-Mediterranean district, which means that there are opportunities opening right now for the part of the project we are building now. So there are, as I said before, for an investor, you have to take the trend at the beginning, and you have to consider that the risks are low, and you have to consider that the returns are high. It's exactly what happens there. First of all, the story is beginning, because the metropolitan area is just now deciding for the whole metropolitan, and it will be on the benefit of Euromed for the decision center at all. Secondly, low risk, because the government and the local governments are ruling the project, they are mastering the project. So as soon as you come to us, you know exactly what will happen within the next 10 years. And for an investor, it's very important to know not only where you can build a road or a bridge, but also where will the school be, where will the hospital be, where will the cultural building be, and then where you can build an office without a lot of risk. And for the third thing, which means we are trying to internationalize our investors, you are welcome, and through Business France, of course, you can visit us, and we will be very kind to welcome you under the sun of Marseille. Thank you for your attention.